going to talk today about how I work, why I chose wetlands, and turn to some of the pieces in this exhibition in Princeton Public Library, how they came about, and what inspired me. So what is eco-art? For me, it is art that has a purpose and is created by artists who are concerned with the state of the environment, both locally and globally. My background as a biologist with a career in science publishing is a crucial backdrop now to my work as an eco-artist. I use my art to create and express fresh awareness of the natural environment using contemporary and traditional media and methods. As much as we care about our Earth, accurate scientific reporting on environmental issues can turn off non-specialists. Professor Michael Oppenheimer from Princeton Environmental Institute noted that a TV satire show described environmentalists as having, quote, no sense of humour, end quote, reflecting perhaps the general view that environmentalists have been unable to address an audience without causing people to tune out. It's surprisingly hard to deliver bad news without sounding preachy. I do try to avoid preachiness and accusatory chest-tapping about the environment, hoping instead to spark interest, a sense of beauty, feelings, and deeper understanding. Only you, the viewer, will be able to judge if I am, in fact, successful. Much of the work exhibited by me here in Wetlands to Woodland, the exhibition at Princeton Public Library, is inspired by wetlands of New Jersey. New Jersey is the most densely populated state in the United States, and even now, after much draining and land development, wetlands are some 19% of the land in the state. Much of the renewed interest in wetlands comes from the unique ability of these habitats to help mitigate human-caused environmental degradation because of their structure and because of their position between land and water. My project process is rooted in work on site, collecting visual information, observing and taking photos and video and sketching. Quite literally, my studio is the outdoors. Much of my thinking takes place here. This slide shows some of the initial studies on wetlands. For me, wetlands are a rich source of inspiration, of course. At the beginning, I'm most interested in structure and form, whether that's the overall shape of the landscape or smaller forms of animals and plants living in it. I set out to feel and try and capture fresh energy in my work. Some of the challenges I faced included developing work that is unique, that's approachable, and captures the essence of place for a viewer. But what about colour? For my work, colours are now usually drawn from the place I'm working in. There is no better source of the colours in a painting palette, in my view. These pieces are part of a series within the Wetlands works, but not exhibited in the library. Each is 2 paintings on a transparent support, laid over each other. I wanted to capture the slow flow and purification of water seeping through wetlands day by day. What are wetlands? Well, they're variously described as swamps, marshes, bogs, fens. They're anywhere where land, vegetation and water occur all together. And that can be seawater or freshwater. I've worked in freshwater and coastal wetlands along the east coast of the United States. The primary factor that distinguishes wetlands from other landforms or water bodies is the characteristic vegetation of aquatic plants that are adapted to the unique waterlogged soils that are often flooded and so lack oxygen. In New Jersey, a frequent signal plant of wetland conditions is Phragmites, or common reed. It is an invasive and non-native plant, and it's highly successful. It can grow in freshwater, brackish water, alkaline and acidic water, wetland buffers, and drier upland areas. The only conditions that challenge Phragmites are full-strength salt water. However, even this invasive has a positive impact, as it acts to stabilise sediment, absorb pollutants, and excess nutrients. So what do wetlands do to help mitigate environmental degradation? Variety of ways in which they act. Water purification is one, for example, removing and utilising nitrates and phosphates, and breaking down pesticides from agricultural runoff as the water slowly flows through wetland. Wetlands are also important in flood control because they absorb water after rain like a sponge and then very slowly release it into the aquifer. Another action of wetlands is to act as a carbon sink. They store carbon in living vegetation, as well as the peats and sediments that are built up over thousands of years. This is really carbon sequestration in action. Wetlands also make a considerable contribution to shoreline stability, because the plants that grow along the shoreline and banks act as a buffer zone. They strengthen the structure and integrity of the shore and provide stability by combining the soils with their roots. Wetlands are some of the most biodiverse areas of the world, home to many endangered animal species. These are just 3 examples of endangered species of wetlands, rendered as drawings on rice paper. There's a whooping crane, a horseshoe crab, and the recently adopted New Jersey state reptile, the 4-inch bog turtle. Even so, given all this environmental value of wetlands, they've not been top of the list for preservation. Consider the meadowlands. Humans often mistreat natural habitat, such as wetlands, that is less hospitable or less obviously useful to them, irrespective of the many other species that occupy it. This photograph is taken at Abbott's Marsh, just off the I-95, and really you would not want to swim in this water. Against this backdrop on wetlands, let's turn to the exhibition. I wonder how many people have been to the Edwin B. Forsyth Wildlife Refuge near Atlantic City. The graph here indicates a roughly 6-inch rise in sea level there over 20 years. We know that is increasing, and as New Jersey is experiencing higher sea levels, it is also undergoing subsidence, meaning the land along the coast is sinking because of geological forces and groundwater withdrawal. I used a multi-panel format for these 5 paintings for 2 reasons. So that I could try and capture the sweeping views across the marsh at the Edwin B. Forsyth Wildlife Refuge in southern New Jersey. If you know it, you'll be familiar with that. But this is not a realistic panoramic view, simply selected elements I saw, with the strong horizontal line of the marsh plants and the colours in my palette connecting the 5 pieces. The multi-panel format is also a reference to the diptych and triptych paintings that first appeared in early Christian art beginning in the Middle Ages. These were created as altarpieces. Their primary function was to serve as an aid to devotion, with images of holy characters. Perhaps that caught my imagination too. This wildlife refuge is more than 47,000 acres of southern New Jersey coastal wetlands, much of which is very shallow, less than 9 inches deep. It was established in 1939 to protect tidal wetland and shallow bay habitat. Within 20 years, when the seawater rises a further 6 inches or more, this area will be inundated with seawater. All the existing plant life you see in these images will be gone, as will the trees. This is documented in the Union of Concerned Scientists report of 2017, when rising seas hit home. When sea level rises faster than the marsh can accrete or compensate, tidal marshes are drowned and replaced by mud or sandflats or open seawater. Now for a bit of biology closer to home. Everyone in the eastern United States will have seen this plant, but in its summer clothes. It's abundant and appears most successful. The skunk cabbage is smelly. I read about the flowers, these are flowers, and was intrigued by them. You have to look for them. They emerge well ahead of the leaves, often when the ground is very cold, even frozen. And skunk cabbage is one of very, very few thermogenic plants. It metabolizes stored starch, which is moved from the storage root to the flower bud for growth. This generates temperatures well above the air temperature to melt frozen ground and grow rapidly. The warmth spreads the odor and attracts early pollinators. Intrigued by the flowers of skunk cabbage, I collected some early one year and cut vertical sections of them to reveal the internal structure. I then placed them on a flatbed scanner and scanned them in. The result of this experiment with my flatbed scanner is the triptych of scanner images in the reading room. This photo shows the triptych laid on the leaves of a very healthy skunk cabbage at Rogers Refuge in Princeton. However, skunk cabbage can have a problem, as widespread as it is. It has contractile roots that pull the stem deeper still into the ground each year. With more flooding, it is literally digging itself into a hole. Obviously, there is always mud in wetlands, and I noticed that the textures, colours and forms vary according to particular local conditions. I started to collect mud from the different locations I went to. Each wetland site has a unique profile with different organic and inorganic components, simply because of local differences in minerals in the soil, what has filtered through them, what the plant population is like, and so forth. I made a number of mud drawings on watercolour paper from the different wetland sites, and you can see the variety of textures and colours. These mud drawings seem to provide strong alternative portraits of place, using natural materials rather than paint. The sampling of mud for this series made me think about wetlands landscape and how to convey the essence of that complex, intricate ecosystem, how to capture the feelings, colours and textures of a place without an attempt at a direct or photographic representation. In sum, I wanted to explore abstraction of this landscape. The slide here shows the continuum from precise representation to abstraction. The natural environment is filled with abstract patterns. The ripples in water, waves, rocks, foliage, and tree branches. And for some viewers, abstraction is more engaging, more immersive, often relying on personal experience and imagination, precisely because the image is not explicitly tied to time or place. Abstraction places more emphasis on aesthetics such as colour, texture, or shape, and every artist has their own particular approach. For wetlands, I was personally influenced by the slow flow of water, the changing colours through the seasons, and the shifts in texture from soggy wet to parched dry. The abstract works exhibited in Princeton Public Library are smaller examples from a series that includes larger canvases, reflecting what I have observed and feel in wetlands over time and through the seasons, the colours and shifts in wetness through the year, incorporating various media to create rich surface textures. At first I lay down artists' crackle sometimes, gels sometimes, pastes on the canvas and let it dry. Then paint is poured onto the canvas, layers and layers of it, plus a great deal of water. In the process of painting these canvases, I mimic what goes on in wetlands by applying wet paint, tilting the canvas to mimic how water flows through wetlands. Like much of my artwork, there was a great deal of trial and error in this process, and I learned to leave the paint alone, let it flow over the surface of the canvas and mix with other paints, and really just see what happens. Leaving the paint alone was actually often the hardest part. The work exhibited here celebrates the unique beauty of wetlands and invites you, the audience, closer to look afresh at this fragile wetland environment that is so readily accessible to most who live in the eastern United States. Wetlands in their humble way are such a valuable contributor to our well-being.